Most AI language tutors are optimized to sound helpful, but not to help you learn. I'm a linguist, and in this video, I'm testing ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity as language learning tools, not as chatbots, not as writing assistants, but as tutors, teachers. I'm looking at how they handle errors, explanations, interaction, and practice, and whether they support the kinds of processes we actually know drive language acquisition. Some of them do surprisingly well. Others fail in ways that aren't obvious unless you know what to look for. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, and here on the channel, I discuss everything related to language, linguistics, language learning, and culture. If you're into those kind of things, be sure to subscribe and to ring the bell for notifications. Anyway, I've spent the last little while really digging into language study with large language models, or LLMs, colloquially known as AI. A few years ago, I was pretty dead set against using AI for language learning at all, but I've changed my tune, and I think they can potentially be a really great resource if used smartly. The problem is, we're all terrible at using LLMs because we want them to be something they're not. And no, I'm not even talking about wanting them to be a therapist, partner, life coach, messianic disciple, and pharmacological expert. Those uses of LLMs seem to keep ending up in the dissolution of marriages, loss of livelihoods, and in extreme cases, death. No, I'm talking about wanting them to be a replacement for a living human language tutor. Now, you'd think they could do this because LLMs are basically metastasized autocomplete, and their whole raison d'etre is to process and manipulate language. I love it when Language Jones speaks French. But you'd be wrong. So if you're going to ChatGPT and you ask it, can you teach me Spanish? You're going to get what you're going to get. And hint, it's not fluent in Spanish. If you want to know how to really make the most of using an LLM for language learning, this is the first of two parts. In this part, I compare the big four, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity, and I know everybody says this, but the overall winner genuinely surprised me. In the next video, I'll discuss what exactly to do with an LLM. Spoilers, I guarantee you are not doing it. Guarantee. That will also be a full segment of my upcoming course in self-directed language study, so keep an eye out for that. You can sign up for updates and to get on the wait list at languagejones.com/accelerator. Hopefully you can spell accelerator. And in exchange, you'll get my linguist guide to language learning prompt engineering. Anyway, in these videos, I'm going to cover a lot of key concepts, and in this video in particular, I'm comparing LLMs on the tasks I think are most useful for a language learner. Not only was I surprised by the winner, but I think a lot of you are going to be surprised at some of the spectacular abject failures, too. So let's get into it. This is Language Jones. LLMs can be incredible for grammar explanations and instant translation, but there is a fluency ceiling when you only practice with AI. You can't simulate the high-stakes pressure of a real conversation with a machine. And even though I've changed my tune and I use AI extensively now, to bridge that gap, I still supplement my AI practice with Lingoda. It's a live language school, not an app, designed to get you speaking with actual humans from day one. They offer classes in French, Spanish, Italian, German, and English. While AI is a great self-study area tool, Lingoda gives you native-level teachers who provide real-time, nuanced feedback that an algorithm just can't match. We're right in the middle of their winter sale. If you sign up for the March sprint by February 24th, you can secure your spot early. With the sprint, you can choose your challenge. A sprint is 15 classes per month for 2 months, and a super sprint is 30 classes per month for 2 months. They also offer a 50% cashback reward if you complete the challenge successfully, and that's up to 100% in the US and UK. Use my code JONESFEB to get an extra €20 or $25 on top of the sale. Don't just talk to your computer, start talking with people. Classes for the next cycle start soon, so hit that link in the description and start your sprint on March 16th. Don't wait until you've already lost your momentum. Speaking of losing your momentum and your mind, let's talk about how the rest of the world is learning with AI. We hear about ChatGPT and LLMs nonstop these days, and most people are using them in a completely unhinged, deranged, insane way. They'll go to ChatGPT instead of Google or a therapist. It's time for my probably weekly reminder that AI is a marketing term and that these large language models built with recursive neural nets are not, despite the name, intelligent, just like how real brand cheese products aren't actually technically cheese by all standards, even if they say real cheese. I'll give you a moment to process that one. The thing is, they very much pass the Turing test, the LLMs, not the cheese. That's when you get above a 50% chance that humans might think they're talking with another human. And because we start to think of them as thinking, we like to do our favorite thing, let somebody else do the thinking. When we apply this to language learning, it's a terrible way to outsource our learning. Teach me Spanish is a terrible prompt, but it feels like it should be good. And ChatGPT responds, Sure thing, I'd love to teach you Spanish. You guys, the personality I imagined as a ghost in the machine, no, not that one, wouldn't lie to me, would it? Now, some of the more AI forward and savvy among you are like, I've got it. Ask the LLM what would be a good prompt. And like, no, my dude, no. I tried that. The problem is, if most people think about a topic wrong, then most of the training data for LLMs will have, at the very best, incorrect or incoherent assumptions built in. And as with most things, the goal of these companies is not to provide you with a tool that saves you time. The tool may do that, but it's incidental to keeping you engaged and using the product. So in the next video, I'll go through all the ways to use an LLM smartly. But to evaluate the big four, the relevant questions I wanted to know were the following. First, does it provide factual information? Another way of asking this is, will it hallucinate whatever I ask it for? Basically, if I don't know enough of my target language to tell right from wrong, will I learn real language or will I learn wrong as a prank?
We have purposely trained him wrong, as a joke.
Bonus points to anybody who names that cinematic masterpiece in the comments. Second, what is the quality of the vocabulary and sample sentences when I ask for those things? Is it useful? High impact vocabulary related to the question at hand? That can be, tell me everything about a particular domain, say going to a bookstore. Or it can be, give me common IR verbs in Italian that end in isco in the first person present tense. Ooh, you're getting some of my prompt engineering for free. Third, where applicable, how is transliteration? Is it a good system? Is it consistent? Is it accurate? Fourth, volume. How much does it return when you ask for vocabulary on a given topic? Is it exhaustive, barely scratching the surface? Fifth, can it format things for me? Spoilers for the next video, but one big task I use LLMs for is to generate language for me to learn with spaced repetition. I use Anki. This means I want to export to CSV formatted for my preferred style of Anki deck. Sixth, can it create images? What is the quality? Seventh, what is the usefulness of the vocabulary? It's a little bit different than the first question. And last, as a bonus, can it explain difficult grammatical concepts clearly and, more importantly, correctly? For this, I asked some deep questions a linguist will know the answer to, but a language teacher often won't. My big three were to explain deontic modality with examples, to explain differences between one kind of verb and another in Hebrew and in Italian, where the answer has to do with stativity and historical change, and to explain the subjunctive. At this point, my video on the subjunctive has been out long enough that it could reasonably be training data for any of them. I'll link at the end. So in the rest of the video, I'll tell you how they stacked up, which excels at which tasks, and which is the overall winner. But first, if you're watching this, you probably want to actually be able to implement best practices to use an LLM to accelerate learning your target language. I have another video coming out soon with how I use my preferred LLM, but you can also grab my free language learning accelerator tech stack guide here at www.languagejones.com/accelerator. I'm giving away the core of the content, which draws on learning science, linguistics, and a deep understanding of neural nets and LLMs, and which I haven't seen anybody else come remotely close to, and you'll get updates when the full course is ready if you want to dig deeper. Now let's compare sycophantic psycho chatbots. Yes, that is the name of my band. So first up, factual information. I tested this by asking ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Perplexity to provide me with a list of Hebrew verbs in the nif-al conjugation pattern with 4 roots. A quick aside, for those of you who are like, what is that? And aren't familiar with Semitic languages, languages like Arabic and Hebrew do this super cool, very different thing where they're analyzed as basically instantiating abstract, semi-meaningful consonant patterns into actual words by interdigitating 3 consonants called roots with vowels. And yes, interdigitating is the technical term. And the combination of the root and vowel pattern makes an actual word that exists. This sounds mind-bending, but it's not that crazy. Here's an example. One of the first roots you learn in Arabic is kataba, which relates to writing. So kataba is he wrote, kitab is a book, maktab is an office or desk, maktaba is a writer, and so on. Different kinds of words, adjectives, nouns, verbs, follow grammatical patterns common to that class of words, but across these patterns, related concepts are often related by having the same, usually 3 consonants, in the same order. It's super fun, and it's a highly robust and productive system. It's a very cool thing. Now, crucially for my test example, while Hebrew words can have 4 roots, they're very rare. And not only that, but when it comes to verbs, they happen in specific conjugation patterns, primarily the ones called PL, and its passive pu'al, and hitpa'el. Don't worry, there will not be a test on this. The point is, there's like no nif-al verbs with 4 roots. If you're going to borrow a word like telephone into Hebrew, you're going to make it ani mitalpen, I am calling, hu tilpen, he called, and so on. That's the PL conjugation. As an aside, my favorite example from grad school was the loan word tirped, to undermine, as in ani metarped et ta project, from torpedo. Nothing undermines your ship like a torpedo. So I asked these AIs for Nephal verbs with 4 root consonants. ChatGPT has the dominant market share, so I asked it first, and boy was it a disappointment. It returned a friendly, extensive, completely false answer. It was almost exclusively Hitpael verbs with 3 roots, but it was the first person plural future which starts with a ni sound, so it was plausible. That is, if you don't know enough to already know that it's wrong, you might not catch that the answer was wrong, and then you learn like imaginary verbs that are a pivot from like one conjugation of another. It's a whole mess. When I asked, hey, aren't those Hitpael verbs?
Wait a minute, I know you. You're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
It was like, no, they're Nephal.
I'm sorry, son, but you must have me confused with someone else.
Perplexity did the same. Gemini took a different approach to wrong that I thought was very interesting, but still wrong. It provided me with 4 root Nephal verbs. They're just verbs that I can't find in any dictionary or used at all in large corpora like reverso context or the tatueba corpus of sentences. So it didn't tell me something that's verifiably wrong because I could say, I recognize that verb and that's a real word in a different conjugation class. No, it just apparently hallucinated verbs for me. A fantastic empirical question would be whether native speakers rate those imaginary verbs high or low on a scale of intelligibility and naturalness, or if there's a surprisal effect in their brainwaves. Neurolinguists, get at me. Let's do this. And then there's Claude. Claude returned a few Hitpael verbs too, but when I asked, are those Nephal or Hitpael conjugation, it then corrected itself and later returned, I don't actually have reliable examples of Nephal verbs with 4-letter roots in Hebrew. The Nephal binyan is, to my knowledge, used exclusively with 3-letter triliteral roots in Standard Hebrew. However, even that was couched in hedging language elsewhere in the response. So, ChatGPT, fail. Perplexity, fail. Gemini, fail but make it interesting. Claude, fail but then correct. Not off to a great start. The second criterion I evaluated was vocabulary and sample sentences. Did it generate vocabulary that was correct when given a more general task that wasn't a trap? Are they better than Duolingo, which has such sentences as, she has a dress, which is technically a real sentence but also like not super helpful for a learner? For ChatGPT, the examples and sentences were fine. Perfectly usable. Honestly, nothing really stood out. So that's a pass. For Gemini, the same. Perplexity was actually really interesting because it provided sources for where it got sample sentences from with a link to the sentence in the wild. In practice, this was like 99% Word Hippo, which is a site I don't generally use. And Claude knocked it out of the park. Where it especially shined was when I combined things like provide a list of all color vocabulary, provide a list of all the clothing vocabulary a person should know, and provide example sentences that combine the two with verbs conjugated in the past tense. Because why not? Starting to see how I engineer prompts? Here, you're already getting some spoilers on my upcoming best practices for using LLMs to learn video. Notice how it's both targeted and combining domains? Anyway, the third criterion I evaluated on was the quality and consistency of transliteration. This won't be relevant to all of you, but for those of you who it is relevant for, you already know how confusing it can be to have multiple transliteration systems and schemes at the same time. ChatGPT had what I would consider a normal transliteration system for everything I tried. Totally unremarkable. Gemini, on the other hand, was weird. You've already seen this if you've ever used Google Translate for Hebrew. The transliteration is not even remotely related to how the words are pronounced. And it weirdly seemed to use a lot of transliteration conventions that are common for reconstructed pronunciation of biblical Hebrew. But not always. Gemini gets an F, at least for Hebrew. Both Claude and Perplexity use the transliteration system I would use. As an aside, all 4 had the occasional weird artifact, like a Cyrillic L instead of an L in English transliteration, or an untransliterated tet instead of a T. It was very strange. The fourth criterion I evaluated was simply volume. Gemini came in with the least volume. When I asked it for sample vocabulary and example sentences, it consistently returned 25 entries, even after paying for the not-free version. ChatGPT didn't do much better, returning about 35 on average. Perplexity bucks the trend by returning 43. I don't need my study materials to be modulo 5 for the remainder of 0, but you kind of don't notice until something isn't. And Claude. Claude returned over 70 on the low end. If I gave a more complicated or involved prompt, it would return sometimes over 200. Now, there's a caveat. Some of them were repeats with a slight difference, so when I took the CSV it produced and went to enter it into Anki, I had to delete sometimes up to about 5%. Interestingly, it was mostly things where there are multiple ways of translating it into English, so it appeared to be generating a list of English vocabulary and translating rather than generating a list of Hebrew or Italian or French vocabulary related to a topic. But you can't really be sure. That brings me to the fifth criterion, formatting. Could it provide me something useful for my study workflow? For instance, CSV format. ChatGPT by default returns weirdly formatted tables with tons of emojis. Ugh. Gemini really shone because it provides useful tables that can connect directly to your Google Sheets, so there's a full integration across Google platforms that eliminates a few steps of tedium. Very clear winner here. Claude provided an actual CSV, but like as text that I had to copy and paste into Sublime Text and save as a CSV. But I'm certain that with a clearer command, it would probably just give me a .csv or an Excel file or whatever. And Perplexity provided a well-formatted CSV. And here's where things get weird. The sixth criterion was images. 3 of the 4 offer to produce images for you, with Claude being the odd one out, which is fine. That's not what it's intended for, and they market more of a sort of academic, professional persona. Claude is more, let me check the dependencies and debug that for you. And ChatGPT is more, why yes, I'm so glad you asked. Unaliving yourself is a very popular option. Lots of people choose to do. You're such a genius. You might be the messiah. Would you like me to brainstorm how to divorce your wife and grow your discipleship? So it's really a question of what you're trying to do with the LLM. I might have accidentally revealed the loser here. But then again, maybe the real losers are the friends we ghosted along the way. Okay, so no images for Claude. Fine. I can use the internet to find pictures. That's basically all it's for. But the others offered to produce labeled images. Let's start weird and get weirder. First, ChatGPT. This is what it produced when I asked for bathroom vocabulary. This is a decent image that looks a little cartoonish, but wouldn't be out of place in a textbook. It's also not a lot of information and weirdly redundant. And some of the characters look a little weird. Perplexity produced this beautiful IKEA magazine looking ass image, and it helpfully labeled everything with gibberish. These are not real words. And of course, I saved the best for last. Google is famous for their almost realer than real nano banana image generation. It is hyper-realistic and very uncanny. Yes, the words aren't real, so it's completely useless, but it's also fucking bizarre. It looks like it was trained on, I don't know, better IKEA magazines or something, but the more you look at it, the weirder it is. The top image, what even is that room? Like, 2 walls are windowed curtains. How does that stand? And the bottom, why is there a full dining set in a bedroom, or a bed in a dining room? What the fuck? I'll give it a D- instead of an F, only because the fake Hebrew is actually really fun to pronounce. Hafia mufum, mafia befium, to you, my friends. So here, Claude is the clear winner simply by refusing to play a losing game. Finally, how useful was the vocabulary? For ChatGPT, it was fine, albeit pretty simple. It returned the most obvious things. Same for Gemini. This may be that they just only produce about 30 items, and so it's a pretty good signal-to-noise ratio and good bang for your buck. Claude gave exceptionally useful vocabulary, including doing basically what I wanted from this, expanding my vocabulary beyond what I'd see in a textbook or other resource. Anybody can teach you pants and shirts. Claude had example sentences and phrases like, a comfortable bra, or I need to buy new underpants. There's probably a story there. Finally, Perplexity knocked it out of the park. The vocabulary was very useful, including some that I didn't see in any of the other 3 LLMs. For instance, in bathroom vocabulary, it provided, wait a moment, it's occupied, and spray some air freshener. Now that's useful. And as that bonus, how did they explain complicated linguistic concepts? Well, surprisingly, they all did well, with questions like, why do some IR verbs in Italian have the infix isc and others don't? How can I effectively memorize them? Is there a pattern that explains the system? ChatGPT gave a decent explanation of the inheritance of a grammatical class from an older Latin inchoative verbal pattern, and a decent job of explaining the concept of an inchoative verb. Where it excelled was its suggestions in how to memorize. Assume isc is the default, and create a blacklist. Now, I actually love how it phrased that in particular. Gemini did a better, more technical job of explaining inchoative verbs and produced an excellent table, which was a great visual learning tool, segmented by morpheme. It also suggested a mnemonic for memorizing the most common non-isc verbs. Perplexity was the one that brought out some semantic elements, noting mental and psych verbs. It also gave the shortest, most concise answer with links to where to learn more directly. That was a huge plus. And lastly, Claude did a good job with a technical explanation, but nothing in particular stood out. For this one, there was no clear winner or loser, and what's really wild is that I can't necessarily take these responses as indicative of a difference in how they all explain, or would explain when you ask. Ask the same question twice, and you're going to get 2 different but similar answers from the same LLM. So each has its strengths, although there was an all-around loser and an all-around winner. ChatGPT was the weakest overall. Gemini excelled at integration with Google products and image generation so long as you don't want the image to be labeled. But if you can't find an image for what you're trying to learn, Nano Banana is a good choice in a pinch. It might be overkill. Gemini was also great for grammatical explanations and clear tables with morphological segmentation. Perplexity really shone in citing its sources and providing where to find out more and in providing some more interesting vocabulary. And Claude was the best for formatting and content and more scholarly or scholarly feeling answers. For my needs, there was a very clear winner and a very clear runner-up. The winner was Claude. Yes, there were things that other LLMs did slightly better, but none of it was so much better that it was worth switching. I do use Gemini as a second backup. Now, all of this is in part because I have a very clear idea of what specifically I want to use an LLM to do and how I want to implement my learning in a broader system, and Claude does the best at that specific kind of task. Now that I've finished all of Duolingo, and I am not going back, and dumped an entire textbook into my Anki, I'm on to self-directed intermediate learning, and I'm using an Anki memorization-heavy workflow. I've already generated an Anki deck with a lot of different topics of interest to me, from espionage to insects to ordering artisan coffee, and the workflow is so easy that I can build out another few hundred things to learn in 10 minutes whenever I get inspired, and then just add it to my system and know that I will learn it, deeply learn it, in a few weeks to a few months. If you want to know more about that system, you're in luck. I got YouTube videos on the basics of how I approach language learning right now. It's ever evolving. And I've got a video coming out soon on how to use LLMs to learn. But if you want to dive much deeper into language learning, combining the science of learning and memory, the specialized knowledge about language a PhD in linguistics has that allows you to ask better questions to learn faster, and the practical day-to-day of what tools to use and when, I'm launching a course later this year. I'm actually launching two, an introduction to linguistics that you can sign up for updates for here, and that language learning accelerator here. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can always support it on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Please leave me a comment. They are great for the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, happy learning, and don't trust ChatGPT.